Everyone these days says they're obsessed with protecting kids. Liberals want to protect them from too much screen time. Conservatives want to protect them from meeting a gay person. Hell, your aunt who got brainwashed by QAnon thinks there's a shadowy conspiracy of child abuse that goes all the way to the top. Now, to be clear, Aunt Linda's losing it and you need to revoke her Facebook access. But the truth is, there actually is a conspiracy to hurt kids in this country that no one is talking about. And everyone from our own government to the biggest corporations in America is complicit. You probably don't realize this, but when you go shopping at retailers like Walmart, Amazon, and Target, everyday products from the cereal you buy for breakfast, to the car you drive to work, to the underwear you're hopefully wearing to the office, were made under grueling conditions in this country by children as young as 12. That's right, child labor is back in America, baby. And instead of trying to stop it, politicians from both parties are doing everything in their power to send more children to work. And if that pisses you off as much as it does me, well, buckle up, chuckle fuck, because the truth is worse than you ever imagined. And in this video, I'm going to tell you why it's happening and who's behind it. But first, I want to thank everyone who supports this channel on Patreon. Your donations make these videos possible and allow me to pay my grown-up adult crew. I mean, they're young at heart. Tony here still plays Pokemon Red. So if you want to chip in, head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. I thank you and Tony thanks you. Oh, you went Squirtle. Good call. I also want to thank our data partner, usafacts.org, for making this video possible. If you want to learn the real facts about America, head to usafacts.org. And finally, I'd like to remind you that I am a touring stand-up comedian, so if you'd like to see me live in a city near you, head to adamconover.net for tickets and tour dates. So we've all known for years that child labor is rife in the overseas factories that make our cell phones and running shoes. But I always assumed that in this country at least, we banned that shit a century ago. But over the past year, there has been an avalanche of reporting about a growing child labor crisis in this country, including a heartbreaking and explosive expose in the New York Times. What this reporting has uncovered is that children are being put to work all across America. And I'm not talking about a couple kids scooping ice cream on the weekends and arguing about whether the chocolate in the moose tracks is supposed to be moose poop. I mean, it is, but that's not the point. I'm talking about old-fashioned, back-breaking, 0 days since our last injury, factory work. In a Michigan food packing plant that made Cheerios and Cheetos, underage workers injured their backs moving heavy cereal pallets, feared getting their little hands caught in the conveyor belts, and said that spicy dust from immense batches of flamin' hot Cheetos made their lungs sting. I mean, come on, this is Willy Wonka level child abuse. What else happened? Did a kid also drown in a river of Go-Gurt? Kids should be eating breakfast cereal, not making it. The slogan is tricks are for kids, not tricks are made by kids. And you know what's really f***ed up? These are major brands. The New York Times found that child labor was being used in the supply chains of Ford, General Motors, J.Crew, Walmart, Target, Fruit of the Loom, and yes, even Whole Foods. Oh, so that's why their chicken's $10 a pound. It's artisanally wrapped by organic human toddlers. This is happening all across the country. There are 12-year-old roofers in Florida and Tennessee, underage slaughterhouse workers in Delaware, Mississippi, and North Carolina, children making Ford and General Motors auto parts in Michigan, and in Los Angeles, children are baking dinner rolls sold at Walmart. I mean, I knew Walmart was exploiting workers who are 80, but not workers who are 8. So what the f*** is happening? I mean, I knew this country was divided. But I thought we could all at least agree that you shouldn't lose a hand to a conveyor belt before you lose your baby teeth to the tooth fairy. And you know what? We used to agree on this as a country. A century ago, millions of American children were working hazardous jobs for minuscule pay. But this was such an obvious horror that Americans demanded change. So as part of FDR's New Deal, we passed laws to end child labor. Common sense stuff like don't let 11-year-olds work at the bullet factory during their math quiz. So what changed? Well, it starts with a meme you've heard repeated by CEOs, talking heads, and Fox News dads across the country, that no one wants to work anymore. The media repeated this condescending corporate canard so relentlessly, a lot of people ended up believing it. But as I've covered on this channel before, if you just glance at the actual numbers, you'll quickly realize it's always been bullshit. As of 2022, more people were working in this country than at any point in American history. So why is it that Denny's suddenly can't find enough line cooks to fry runny eggs? Well, Denny, if that is your real name, maybe it's because the job you're offering sucks fucking ass. Americans want to work. They are working, but they are simply not willing anymore to work for the poverty wages of the past. So if these companies can't find an adult willing to get their hands stuck in a conveyor belt at 1 a.m., they might want to consider offering more than a child's allowance to do it. But no, instead of treating their workers with dignity and handing out a raise or two, these companies are choosing to bring in actual kids. After all, you don't have to pay a child as much as an adult. You just tell him if he works really hard, daddy might come back. Now, all of this isn't just grotesquely abusive, it's also straight up illegal. So what is our government doing in response? You know, the people whose job it is to protect us, particularly children, from danger, exploitation, and death? Well, it turns out that politicians from both parties, Republicans and Democrats, including pro-union Joe himself, aren't just complicit. They are literally working to weaken child labor laws and put school-aged children to work. There are bills being introduced or already signed in Georgia, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, South Dakota, New Jersey, New Hampshire, and Illinois that remove child labor protections. In fact, just this year, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds passed a law that makes it legal to put 14-year-olds to work until 11 p.m. in freezers and meat coolers. Yeah, who doesn't have wistful memories of that classic after-school job, dismembering beef carcasses till midnight in sub-zero temperatures? Builds character to chop your knuckle off with a cleaver at that age. And Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders passed a law that makes it legal to put children as young as 12 to work in meat packing plants, car factories, and yes, even McDonald's. Yeah, what kid needs to eat a Happy Meal when they could be making Happy Meals? I mean, just think about how fucked this is. These gigantic corporations have such a stranglehold over power in this country that they've convinced our politicians to reverse one of the most important child protection laws of the past century just so they can make an extra buck. And the result is that 100 years after kids stopped dying of black lung in the coal mines, they're now coming down with orange lung in the Cheeto mills. If you still need proof that unchecked capitalism is destroying America, this is it. But you know what? It gets worse. This story is about to get a hell of a lot darker, and you're about to get a hell of a lot angrier. Because think for a second. Even though there's an epidemic of child labor in this country, I bet most of you watching don't actually know any 13-year-olds who are scrubbing pig intestines off the kill floor at 2 a.m., right? I know that Sarah and Kim's kids definitely aren't. Their kids get to go to school, get an education, and eat the cafeteria hot dogs those other kids make. So who are these child laborers? Well, the brutal truth is that the vast majority of these punishing, dangerous jobs are being performed by migrant children. See, things in Central America are dire right now. Because of violence, famine, and environmental devastation, many parents there cannot feed their children or provide them with the basic necessities we take for granted here. And so tragically, their only option is to flee the country they grew up in. But they can't because adults are not permitted to cross the US border. However, because of a 2008 law, unaccompanied minors aren't generally turned away because the risk to their safety is too great. And so, rather than let their children languish and possibly die, thousands of parents are forced to make the gut-wrenching decision to send their children alone on the harrowing journey across the border. And as a result, last year alone, the number of unaccompanied children entering the United States climbed to a high of 130,000. Horrific images of children being kept in jail-like conditions by the US government flooded social media, and the public demanded the Biden administration do something. So, what did they do? Why, they overhauled our broken immigration policies, sent aid to address the root cause of the crisis, and ensured that every child was reunited with a parent or caretaker, of course. Just kidding. They made like Henry Ford and turned the border into an assembly line. Biden's Secretary of Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra, started slashing protections that had been in place for years so that the federal government could shove those kids through the system and across the border as quickly as possible. And just like the chocolate factory scene from I Love Lucy, a lot of those kids got eaten by Lucille Ball. I mean, they fell through the cracks. Our government literally lost track of at least a third of these kids. And these are children we're talking about, not luggage on Spirit Airlines. But the feds were like, oh, was that 8-year-old boy supposed to go to Detroit? Our system says he went to ? Did you put an AirTag on him? So what happened to the thousands of children our government misplaced? Well, caseworkers estimate that 2/3 of them ended up working full time. The Biden administration literally built a border-to-factory pipeline for child labor. And as a result, the number of children found working illegally has literally quadrupled since 2015. And Biden's Labor Department knows it's happening. Those are their numbers. So why on earth aren't they cracking down to protect children and stop it? Simple. It's because even when they do, the only punishment for illegally employing children to do dangerous hard labor is nothing more than a fine. A fine. You know, just like parking your car on the wrong side of the street on a Tuesday. Oopsies, officer, did I make a boo-boo? Sorry, let me write you a check. I mean, some of these fines are truly laughable. Just this year, a factory owner in Michigan illegally hired a minor to operate a dangerous meat grinder. The child had their hand ripped off in the gears of the machine, and the factory owner was tried and found guilty of violating child labor laws. And you know what the penalty was for permanently maiming an innocent kid? A fine in the amount of $1,143. That's it. According to the state of Michigan, this kid's hand is worth the same as a shitty couch from IKEA. But you know what? I don't think having one less Slottorp in the break room is going to stop a giant meat company from doing whatever the they want. It's a small price to pay if you're saving stacks of cash by exploiting children for discount labor. And that's the problem. When the penalty for a crime is a fine, then that crime is legal for anyone with enough money. And you know, isn't this all kind of weird? Because our politicians love to brag about how tough on crime they are, don't they? Shoplifting, drug possession, oh, they're super tough on those crimes. But when a bill was introduced this year that would have gotten tough on child labor violations by introducing jail time as a possible punishment, it got no support from Congress or the White House and died on the vine. If you're a kid shoplifting Nikes, our politicians want to lock you up. But if you're a CEO exploiting kids to make Nikes, they say, just do it. And you know what the most fucked up part is? This bizarre unwillingness to do anything to stop the child labor crisis comes, again, at a moment when everyone in America claims to be obsessed with protecting children. They want to protect them from fake threats, like violence in the media, from drag queens, from reading an LGBTQ book in the library. Hell, the entire QAnon conspiracy theory is supposedly about fighting against a child trafficking ring that wants to eat your kid's adrenochrome. But when it comes to protecting children from real-life exploitation, trafficking, and death, everyone, from liberals in the White House to right-wingers on 4chan, are pathetically silent. The truth is, there actually is a conspiracy to hurt kids in this country that goes all the way to the top. But it's not about sex, it's about money. It's about the Cheerios you eat being 5 cents cheaper to produce so some motherfucker in a private jet can make an extra nickel. And until our leaders confront that fact, how wrong that is and how complicit they are, they cannot say that they care about crime, and they cannot say that they care about kids. Because if you really want to protect children, it's not enough to just say it. You have to fucking do something about it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned something, or if it just made you really productively angry, I hope you'll consider supporting this channel on Patreon. Head to patreon.com/Adam Conover. At the $15 a month level, I will put your name in the credits of every single one of my monologues, just like these fine folks here. If you want to see me do stand-up, head to adamconover.net for tickets and tour dates, and I'll see you very soon with a new video.